What do you think of this? According to a new study published by Oxfam, one billionaire emits 1 million times more greenhouse gases than the average person. Sit with that. The study analyzed the world's richest and found that emissions from their lifestyles and investments equal the carbon footprints of entire countries like France and Argentina. That's correct. So the study was dropped while the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference is happening right now in Egypt, where a delegation from some First Nations in British Columbia will be presenting a plan for a more greener future. So what are our thoughts on this? Jody, let's start with you.
Well, I think that everybody should look at these studies and recognize that climate change is the biggest issue impacting everyone worldwide. We all have a responsibility and a role to play in climate change in our individual lives. Certainly billionaires have a responsibility, as do first world countries like Canada, and our emissions. We need to cap our emissions and we need to reduce them. And we have responsibilities as a country, and this is what's being talked about in Egypt, to recognize that there are countries who are bearing the brunt of climate change. And what's our role as a country? What's our role as, I'm not a billionaire, but billionaires, but as individuals, we all have a role to play. And I think it's an important conversation that could take up so many of these shows.
I don't know if this is obvious to say, but like, who makes somebody a billionaire? Like we do. Like if you're, listen,
Kylie Jenner.
You're gonna make a Kylie Jenner because you like her lip gloss? Okay, great, buy the lip gloss. But, if we look at the big giants like the Jeff Bezoses of the world relied on Amazon largely during the pandemic especially. So I think on the one hand, we know it's consumption, and whatever that word means, but consumption and consumerism, creating products, using up energy to make products is behind this. And so I do have to say, like, as I often want to do, it seems like such a big problem. Like, what am I gonna do? I can't stop billionaires from being billionaires. I can't stop China or the United States from emitting the way that they do. So like that makes me feel very helpless and it makes me feel very hopeless. So I'm trying to look at what are the bright spots? Like what can I do to really feel like I'm making a difference? Because I hate to say it, my paper straw ain't doing squat. It's the truth. It might make you feel good in the moment. It's doing nothing when you have massive emitters and billionaires flying around in their private jets. But I will point to this, and I have to do a little bit of a shout out. I'm a board member at World Wildlife Fund Canada. We have a big contingency that are right now in Egypt, and they are there with Indigenous leaders because there's no work that the WWF Canada does in Canada that isn't led by Indigenous partners in especially sensitive areas. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't have to tell you this, Jody, but maybe remind people, Indigenous people have been stewards of the land for millennia. So if anybody knows how to protect the environment, it's Indigenous groups. And so for that, I think that's the bright spot for me. There is a way out if we would just listen to not the billionaires.
Well, I mean, that's the point, though. I mean, I'd love to hear your thought, but just like, who's listening? Like, that's where it becomes a situation of, is government actually backing action? Is the divisive? There's still people who get upset about carbon emission taxes and are like, no, this is, and trying to question the science. So who is listening? So it's great that there's a conference going on. It's great that there are Indigenous leaders there, but what does that translate into once they get back home?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to point out the fact that everybody's flying somewhere to go to a conference, but on the issue of worldviews, we all have different worldviews, Indigenous peoples included. And, the vast majority of Indigenous peoples view our connection as human beings as fundamentally integral to the maintenance of the natural world. There's a huge amount that individuals can learn from people who have survived for millennia. So I take the point, and people just need to open up their minds to distinct worldviews and how we work and live together.
Opening minds and access, because, you're talking about this meeting, Mel. The World Wildlife Foundation Fund was invited to speak. We talked about the BC Indigenous leaders being invited to speak in Egypt. But I also think about meetings like, have you all heard of the World Economic Forum? Everybody
Davos.
talks about Davos every year, right? And typically, the conversation about Davos is who's going, what billionaire is going, how exclusive it is. It costs so much money to go. They only have this like short guest list of the who's who of billionaires and CEOs and organizers and whatever. You have to be a mega VIP. When you get there, there's all kinds of gossip about what color your badge is. Like if it's just plain white, then you're kind of a commoner at Davos, even though like the entry rate is something like $40,000. And then if you have the hologram, then you are a VVVVIP, right? And so it's all these billionaires invited to talk to each other in a little circle.
About monetary policy.
About monetary policy, claiming that they care about the environment because they invited David Attenborough there a couple years ago, plus Prince William, to tell these billionaires that they should care more about the animals and the elephants and the whatever. But they're not inviting the right people because typically this is a 1% exclusive party that runs the world. So I think these meetings are great in Egypt, and of course they're gonna have meaningful conversations. But if we need to get those other people to listen, the ones who are causing the most damage, how do we break through there? Like, are we gonna crash Davos? Like, I don't know. Maybe we should.
Hey there, wasn't that great? Do you know where you can find some equally good content? Our YouTube page. It's filled with discussions, debates, and some laughs. Head there now, like and subscribe.